2 weeks ago, I posted a video responding to the poor reviews that Redemption Reapers got early on, and addressed many of the issues those reviews brought up. Now, after playing through the game, putting over 30 hours in, and beginning a run on hard mode, I'm here to give you the real story on Redemption Reapers. Why do I think the reviews got it all wrong? Let's start with the aesthetics and story. Redemption Reapers is a beautiful story of loss, survival, and a search for redemption in a dark fantasy world on the brink of destruction. While the graphics may not be the most amazing you've ever seen, they are still good, and the art style does a great job of conveying that end-of-the-world feel. This, in conjunction with the music, which is simply amazing for an indie title. Some of the best music I've heard in a game recently. These things combine to create a world that draws you in and drives home the desperation and even resignation present within it. This all sets the backdrop for a story that, while it may start off slow and ambiguous, develops over time into a deeper understanding of the protagonists, their deep-seated guilt, and a quest for some small amount of redemption. A lot of the world building comes in from reading the entries in the archives as you unlock them. I know that reading these isn't everybody's idea of fun, but if you're playing Redemption Reapers, you've probably played a lot of other TRPGs or even CRPGs where this is fairly common. If you don't read these though, you're really missing out, as they help you understand the world before the Mort and how their sudden appearance affected its peoples. Think of how we understand the lore of Dark Souls, and you'll know what I mean. Moving over to the gameplay now, yes, Redemption Reapers can be difficult, but not to the levels of unfair that some reviewers made it out to be. In fact, the gameplay is very rewarding as each mission presents you with what looks like an insurmountable challenge. But then as you begin to break it down and strategically and methodically take down each group of Mort while being careful not to expose yourself too much, you find yourself feeling like a tactical genius. Each win feels earned. Carefully positioning each of your squad members and then setting off multiple chain attacks that eliminate several enemies all in one turn gives you a feeling of accomplishment that I haven't really experienced in any other tactics game. The power curve is really well done here too. At the start of the game, each member of the Ashen Hawks only has a basic attack and a defend option, but as they level up, they begin to gain better and more powerful abilities. Many of these abilities will actually change the way you fight and take on maps too. For instance, once Urs unlocks his dedicated defender ability, you can effectively use him as a tank, allowing you to be a little more aggressive when moving through the battlefield. Then there are abilities like Sarah's Butterfly Sting that allow her to attack without being hit by the counterattack, or Karin's Double Strike, which gives her a free follow-up attack every time she attacks. You even gain healing abilities on almost every character to supplement your spirit drafts, while some characters will also earn abilities that lower enemy defense or speed. All these abilities and more open up a wide variety of options that allow you to come up with several different strategies and tactics to tweak to your own style. In the mid to late game, you even get access to ultimate abilities that can do massive damage in addition to providing other beneficial effects to your squad. The power curve of the game strikes a good balance between making you feel much more powerful while still providing a real challenge all the way through the game. Speaking of that challenge, new enemies are routinely introduced throughout the game, keeping you on your toes. There are 18 total different enemy types throughout the game, everything from your frontline grunts, to heavily armored juggernauts, to archers, casters, and even spawners. The game also throws a lot of unique map layouts at you, with various routes to take advantage of and loot drops to tempt you. There are different objectives from time to time too, including escort missions. It is worthy to note that the escort missions actually felt pretty good and fair. One will have you escorting a diplomat who can fight and is actually smart enough to stay next to your backline unit and in relative safety. Another will have you escorting a child who will just keep running to the exit, simulating a frightened civilian who won't make the best decisions, and thereby forcing you out of your comfort zone in order to protect them. Missions that require you to simply get to an exit point to win will often include loot that is off the direct path, tempting you to go grab it. However, if you lose even one unit on these maps, the objective will change and you will have to eliminate all enemies instead of just escaping. I thought this was actually a pretty cool touch, adding in some risk-reward scenarios. The enemy AI is decent here too, as if you leave a unit in their range that isn't defending, they will tend to target that enemy rather than one that is defending. They also seem to target your higher damage dealers too if they can, so you really do pay the price if you leave yourself exposed. But I never felt like the game was unfair. Every time I lost a unit, it was my fault, not the result of some RNG in the background. This is really important to me in a strategy game too. I understand that most of the time RNG is an easy way to simulate unexpected results. But when I've executed a perfect strategy, crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's, I shouldn't lose a unit just because a unit who has a 1% crit rate gets a crit with exactly enough damage to kill my unit. The enemies in Redemption Reapers seem to do set amounts of damage and do not crit, though your unit still can. This in turn allows for better planning. Where the RNG comes in is in attack accuracy, and this affects enemies and your units both. Though low accuracy on your part can be compensated for through skills, items, and weapons. Missed attacks weren't common for me, but they did happen from time to time. Though if you're playing the game the way it's meant to be played, where you've lined up several follow-up attacks, the enemy will probably still fall, even if one of your units miss.
Your time has come.
Finally, the last fully positive thing I'd like to mention is the sense of weight you get when moving your characters around. Sarah and Karin, for instance, move very quickly, simulating their smaller frame and associated quickness, while Urs moves much slower and feels like a hulking beast of a man. Then Glenn and Luff fall somewhere in the middle. I thought this was a pretty cool little touch the developers added to the game, and shows attention to detail that helps with the immersion too. It's not all good though. There are a few things about the game that I will say are sticking points for some gamers, and I want to go over those here, as if these bother you, then maybe this isn't the game for you. On the other hand, some gamers will absolutely love some of these features and want to play Redemption Reapers all the more because of them. So let's jump into these somewhat controversial aspects. First up, resource management is a pretty big part of Redemption Reapers. There aren't a lot of resources to manage, but you do have to make some hard choices. The two main resources to manage are your gold and your weapons. Weapons have durability and must be repaired using gold, or they become far less effective in combat. That said, you can equip up to 5 different weapons on each of your characters and switch between them during battle. This helps alleviate the need to repair weapons as often, as you can use weaker weapons to finish off enemies, saving your best weapons for full strength enemies or bosses. The weaker weapons are also much cheaper to repair, which brings up a good point about how Redemption Reapers will challenge conventional thinking. In this case, that the strongest weapon is always the best to use, or in the case of attacking enemies, that everyone should attack directly. Back to resource management though, if you make use of all your weapons and spread out the durability loss, you'll now be able to use more gold on upgrading your weapons using the various ores you can find during battles, or on the shop to buy more weapons or even stat increasing items. You do need to choose carefully though, as you don't come by a lot of gold very often. You can skirmish for it, but this will take a good chunk of time. Which brings up skirmishes. Yes, Redemption Reapers does have skirmish battles. However, once you reach certain points in the story, older skirmish battles will no longer be available as new ones become available. You can grind both money and XP out of skirmishes, however, you will eat up weapon durability during these and gain diminishing returns on XP when your level is higher than the skirmish battle's level. The honest truth about skirmishes is that the main reason to do them would be to go back and get chests or relics that you missed on those battlefields. As long as you're playing as a squad and everyone is getting attacks off, you won't really need to grind any levels. And the money you can get from the loot in skirmishes won't make up for the lost durability on your weapons, unless you use your weaker or even broken weapons to skirmish with, which is actually a viable option. This then brings me to the next point, and that is that Redemption Reapers is meant to be a streamlined, story-driven experience. You won't find branching paths or side quests here. A playthrough of the game will take you about 25 hours, give or take. As I mentioned in my previous video, Redemption Reapers is a story of survival in a dying, apocalyptic, dark fantasy world following a small squad of mercenaries. In this, the developers succeeded. The game is what it was meant to be, and it's good within that framework. But if you want a 70-hour game with side quests and multiple branching paths, this game may not be for you. My last point in this list of make or break details, and one that I missed in my previous video that a good many gamers have taken issue with, is the lack of any zone of control in Redemption Reapers. So no, you don't have any way to keep enemies from walking past your frontline units to your rearguard. But to be fair, neither do any of the enemies. My thought on zone of control is that it isn't a necessity in TRPGs. Some games have it and some don't. For instance, Triangle Strategy didn't have zones of control. Units can move freely around enemies with impunity. In Tactics Ogre Reborn, zones of control were available only to a few unit types, and these didn't truly prevent enemy movement, they only slowed it down. Zones of control are far more common in CRPGs, where you have things like opportunity attacks and the like. So for players coming from a background heavier in CRPGs, I can see how this would be frustrating. All of that said though, I don't think a zone of control system would have fit the theme and style of Redemption Reapers all that well. The idea of surviving against overwhelming odds loses some impact if I can just put one unit in the way and the whole horde just comes to an abrupt stop. But thematic reasons aside, there are other creative ways to deal with not having a zone of control. For instance, some points on maps were tight enough that I could put 2 units in them and block the enemy's advance anyway. Also, because you can move, attack, and then move again, if you still have movement left, oftentimes you can actually move a unit up, attack, and then withdraw to safety again. In my time with the game, Karin the Archer rarely ever got attacked thanks to careful planning and positioning. To sum it up, I guess, the lack of a zone of control actually adds to the game rather than takes away. It is a feature, not a bug, that makes the game intentionally more challenging, but also, in my opinion, more rewarding. But that is just my opinion, and you may disagree. Zones of control can be really fun and useful tools to use, and some games use them to great effect. But I don't think that they're a necessity for a good tactics game, so long as other options are available to compensate for them not being present. Now let's talk about a couple of things that are just straight up negatives. First up, I did find one bug. On one mission, we have to attack a more occupied fort, and 2 NPC allies accompany us. At one point during the mission, I had all of my units just outside of the enemy's range, but my ally moved up to attack. When he did, the enemies did not aggro and just stood there taking hits from him. I let this play out for a while until I finally moved up and attacked. At this point, the enemies aggroed as normal. This was the only time I experienced this though, so it certainly isn't game breaking, but it's definitely noticeable. The second thing is that you're given some dialogue choices from time to time, but these have absolutely no effect on the game at all. This is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, as if you're gonna give me a dialogue option that sounds like it's gonna change an upcoming mission or have consequences later on, it needs to do so. Otherwise, don't even put the option in. Don't even tease me with it.
Sarah's right. Let's focus.
All in all though, Redemption Reapers is a solid indie title from a developer that I see a lot of promise in. I would like to see Redemption Reapers get a sequel or another game set in its universe that expands on what was present in this game. Maybe even a larger game with more characters and skills and some side quests. But I'd still want it to maintain the feel of Redemption Reapers, as the developer Adglobe did an excellent job in both the overall presentation and gameplay of presenting a dark fantasy world where every battle may be your last. If you like tactics games that don't hold your hand but reward you for good planning, then this game is for you. The price is still a little high though, considering the game is only a 25-hour playthrough, or 50 if you play through on hard again. My recommendation for the majority of players would be to wait for a sale and pick it up at $30 or $40. But if you're a hardcore tactics fan with a love of dark fantasy apocalyptic settings, you'll probably be just fine with the full price. If you want to see my previous video where I mentioned some of the things I didn't mention in this one, you can watch it here next. Remember to like the video and leave a comment with your thoughts on the game. And as always, thank you so much for watching, have a great day, and keep on gaming.